Danger Dolan. So here we have another WoW Q&A, starting with a question from Kozyakar. How would you change professions to make it better in the new expansions? Well, first what you need to understand is that the idea of professions have evolved since Vanilla WoW and the current incarnation, which is that it hasn't really changed. But in other games, other big MMOs like Star Wars: The Old Republic or Neverwinter, they've revamped the system so that instead of going out to pick up herbs and just really boring, dull, monotonous things, you actually just have to play the time game, right? You click a thing that says, I want you, my little helper, to go out and go into a dungeon and then assassinate the president and then come back with his shirt. Now, WoW doesn't exactly need that. It doesn't need the time game. It just needs an overhaul in some respects. Just like the talent trees, where they got rid of the cookie cutter builds that everyone had because, you know, if you did it in a certain way, that was just deemed wrong. With professions, it's kind of the same thing. It's so outdated that it only really has one use. It's not very interactive. You just make the thing you want to make. Like, let's just say a pattern drops off a boss. You get the things you need for that pattern, then you make it, and then you're done. Or you collect things in the world, and then you sell them on the auction house, and you're done. Now, while that does get you out into the world, the thing is, it's not a very interesting way to do that. Whereas if you treat professions more like a legendary quest chain, it'll actually make you go out in the world to do certain tasks to get the materials you need to get a piece of equipment, or to augment pieces of your existing equipment. Just like item upgrades, maybe professions are the way to do the item upgrades, or something along those lines, to enhance your armor in some way. A great way to do that is to explore the relationship between professions and garrisons. I mean, they could have a mix of the two, where you have an actual building dedicated to your profession, and let's say you can send one of your followers out to do a certain task or kill a certain boss, and it takes them a certain amount of time, like a long amount of time, let's say a couple of days. Or you can choose to do it yourself and have it be done a lot faster. And then once you get the materials back to your garrison, you can actually interact with them. You go into the building and you start clicking around, just like that quest in Zul'Drak where you have to help the doctor and you have to click certain items in a certain time and put them in the cauldron or whatever it was. Something like that, something to get people, you know, moving and doing things and actually be interested and actually construct things. Give it a physical value instead of some random obscure menu selection, which is basically what WoW's all about. It's about queuing for things in menus and always doing things in menus and toggling things in menus, whereas it's much more immersive to be in the world and doing all these things yourself. So Kozyka asked, how would I change professions to make them better for the new expansion? And those are my thoughts. I would overhaul the whole system. It is one of the last systems in WoW that have not seen a significant overhaul since release. Everything else has been cleaned up, like the Cataclysm, the entire 1 to 60 overhaul, and the talent sheet. Everything's been fixed except for this one thing, and it really does need to be fixed. I'm not overly interested in professions, like personally, but I do see the need to make them less awful. And now the main question from ICM Zinza. What is your take on the current item level system? I myself have a problem that if you're gearing up for Siege of Orgrimmar raiding, you need to start with LFR to go to Flex, and you need to finish Flex for normal, and then you need to finish normal for heroic in terms of eye level. But when you have done it on 2 difficulties already, it's not as epic going for normal, and it seems kind of dull to do it so many times. I hope they will fix the eye level problem I have had in WoD. So this is a classic overuse of content on Blizzard's part, and they're very, very aware of what they're doing. And make no mistake, it is cheap. It's just like when they replaced dungeons with heroic scenarios in Mists of Pandaria, just so they could make their 5,000 boss raid tiers. I mean, they've given all kinds of arguments and opinions on why they're doing it, and you know, you just get fed up with hearing it. It's just the fact that they're cutting corners so that they can put in effort in places that really are one component of the whole picture. And then Blizzard always come along, you know, waving around their stat sheet that shows that people are doing raids now because LFR is a thing. And then their audience are just nodding along, half sedated, half asleep, drool coming out of their face. And Blizzard turn around to say, well, maybe we should put all of our effort into raids because apparently that's all people like, you know, it makes them stick around longer. So let's just get the dungeon team, you know, just screw dungeons, scenarios, you know, they're just glorified group quests in an instance, and let's make a 10,000 boss raid tier so that people can be doing that forever. You know, I'm not gonna turn around and say, well, you know, I like boss tiers that have only 2 bosses. Like, no, I like big boss tiers, but you can't sacrifice every single thing on Earth for it. I mean, the paradigm beforehand was that you went from dungeons to heroic dungeons into raids, and that was it. And now it's just raids to raids to raids to raids. I mean, in Warlords of Draenor, sure, we're going to be doing dungeons, heroic dungeons for 5 minutes before everyone realizes that LFR awards better gear anyway, and then no one's going to do them anymore. I mean, I asked that one question at BlizzCon, like I stepped up and I asked, are you going to make scalable dungeons? And they said, well, we're working on it. But what I was going to ask, my other question was, are you going to make heroics not be a joke anymore? But now that I know that the item level in the dungeons is lower than LFR, my question would have been, are you guys idiots? And I know that their argument is you can do dungeons endlessly, whereas LFR is but once a week. But people, get this, will always go for the route with the best gear, even if they have to wait, right? I'm sure some of you already know my story from the start, or the start of Mr. Pandaria, where I was leveling up a new toon, and basically the situation was dungeons were so easy. I just spam dungeons to get gear to be able to do raids, right? That took me all of 5 minutes. And then the Valor cap, it meant I have to just wait week by week for the, you know, the Valor gear. And so I was forced to do stuff like LFR in order to get the gear faster to be able to do actual raids with my guild. I mean, the problem isn't that the content is hard. I mean, if you're doing it in an LFG environment, if people can click a button to get into the instance, of course they're gonna leave as soon as it gets hard. Like that's obvious. But now that they've got this group finder system for Warlords of Draenor, people are gonna stick around. So you can make it hard, but it has to be rewarding. Well, people aren't gonna stick around. They're gonna look at it and be like, "What the fuck? I'm not doing this." Like I'm sure it's gonna be like challenge modes where maybe your guild will get together and be like, "Man, I have no life. Let's do something to eat away the spare time between raids." And so they'll choose to do maybe some heroic dungeons. But then they have the gear already because they're raiding, and it defeats the point. Now, as from Heal vs Babyface suggested some alternate rewards for dungeons, and I happen to agree with him. Some cosmetic things and maybe some raid boost items from heroic dungeons. Like you can get flasks and certain buffs that happen for a period of time that just helps you in a raid environment. Because otherwise, get this, people will stop doing heroic dungeons after the first month. Okay, now let's look at what the system was in Burning Crusade. You know, Burning Crusade wasn't the best expansion ever, but it did have a nice curve in terms of the content difficulty and the range of content. So you had heroic dungeons as the end game for casuals, where you could go in with a small group because you're usually pugging to get some gear, and that's really fun. It usually takes you a while to get through the dungeon, and it's really difficult. It was good. And then you go to small Karazhan 10-man raids with a guild. That introduces you to raids, and there's a lot of bosses in Karazhan, so you can just go with whatever boss is in your fancy that week. You know, I want to go Horseman, I want to go straight to the end boss, whatever the crap you want to do, it's fine. And then from there you go to 25-man raids for the big guilds, the big epic encounters. That it was exclusively for 25-man raids, so it just felt epic as soon as you got there. Now for Warlords of Draenor, you have 4 different difficulty levels of the same damn thing, the same raid, and it's been like that since Mr. Pandaria. And we also have time trial dungeons and these hard mode dungeons, the heroic dungeons that nobody's going to want to do because the rewards are likely going to, let's be honest, suck ass. It's just a big problem. And Blizzard just don't get it, right? They don't understand that when the pendulum swings from these humongous raid tiers and the many difficulty levels they're in to these dungeons where we only get like 6 from the 15 we used to get from Burning Crusade, and they don't even know what dungeons should be anymore. They used to be a catch-up tool for gear. They used to be a way to gate people from like, the casuals from doing raids. Like it was like the rite of passage for them. Now they're just a thing that you do if you prefer that, and they reward gear to help you catch up. But there are other methods to do that. You can just do raids to get better gear. You can literally press a button and find a 25-man raid in LFR and get that even better gear. And now heroic dungeons are competing with challenge modes because it's just the same thing. You know what? I just realized that now we have 3 difficulty levels of dungeons. This is getting ridiculous. Am I alone in this universe where I just see a massive problem here? Like, why even put dungeons in the game anymore? Just don't even make them unless you're going to take them seriously. Like, they need to have a board meeting where they just sit down and say, okay guys, what the fuck is the point of dungeons? And then they bat out a bunch of ideas and they make it happen. You know, fix the rewards, fix the difficulty levels, make a decision about whether or not it is to gear you up for raids or it's a side thing to get cosmetic and boosty rewards. So I see MNZ's question about my take on the current item level system. I think there are major problems, but mostly in the dungeon department. As long as they sort out this gearing up for raids nonsense, this mess, as long as they can fix that. Like raids themselves, like normal and heroic, they've been the same since, what was it? Wrath, I think, when they introduced heroic. It's been perfect, that is perfect, but gearing up for it is a fucking nightmare, and I really wish they would fix it. If you guys feel the same way, I strongly encourage you to comment down below. I'm going to be reading them. I want to see how you feel about this whole situation, because maybe I'm just talking out my ass, but there's just problems, and there's no solution, and I would just rather see it die a bit. Anyway, that is it for this Q&A. Have a good one!